Welcome to Mechs on Deck. Today it's episode 18. We're talking about mounting styles. We're pretty excited to talk about this, about different types of mounting styles and kind of how they affect your keyboard, the way it sounds, the way it feels. Kind of dive in deep.
Picking up good vibrations. She's giving me that.
So I'm Osiris. This is Chewy. We are Mechs on Deck. If you haven't heard of us, this is us.
This is your first time watching. Welcome.
Welcome.
So yeah, we got some cool stuff lined up. But before we get started, we're gonna make a quick couple of announcements. So we are sponsored by some lovely sponsors. Switchmod.net. If you go to switchmod.net/mechsondeck, you can get 4% off all of your Luby goodness needs and some springs and some stickers. You can get cool stickers like this. And yeah, Krublet's a cool dude. We just had him on stream last week. So, and all this stuff will be below, as well as Dixie Mech. So Dixie Mech, you can go to mechsondeck.dixiemech.com. It just gives us some help. He's got Bauer coming out. He's got 8008, more things to come. I know they announced round 3, 9009. GMK Terra looking real promising. So some cool stuff coming out. Be sure to use our affiliate link. It helps us. And support Dixie as well. Support the South.
Yeah. Last but not least, we've got Zap cables. You can watch our video if you want to build your own custom cable. You can go on his website and pick out all your colors, what length you want, what kind of connectors you want, get that all made. Watch our video where John walks us through a full cable kit on how to get it all together and made. He also is opening up new rounds of cables made by him. Every couple of weeks he'll open one up. You got to get there fast because it does kind of sell out in like 15 seconds. It's pretty crazy, but if you want to be notified about that, make sure to join his Discord. Join our Discord too if you have questions. We've got a bunch of people here that can help ask questions about cables or keyboards in general. But yeah, check Zap out. We got some cool stuff coming up. He's got some stuff that he's been working on. If you're not familiar with the bumper, he's got that coming out pretty quick. So doing his first Zap cables keyboard.
Yes. And for any of you artists out there, we have a promotion going on with Zap. So we tomorrow will be the last day to submit before 8 p.m. Central. Probably a little after. But we are running a promotion to where if you create, and we're looking for people to create Twitch emotes for us. We have 2 spots available. And the people that design the ones that we pick will each win a custom Zap cable outside. So you don't have to worry about getting in on these super fast selling out little group, not group buys, but just runs. So we will have 2 winners. You can enter as many emotes as you want. We've been getting some good ones, and we hope to see some more stuff come out from you guys.
Yeah, and actually, we're also giving away a keyboard tonight. Actually, Chewy himself will be building a burgundy tofu. It's the tray mount, which we're going to talk about tray mount here in a little bit, but it's just the standard 60% tofu. He's going to be building that with some red ink switches. Pretty stoked about that. If you want to win that, click the link in the description for our Twitch. We're going to be streaming tonight at 8 p.m. Central Time. So that would be 6 p.m. Pacific, and then all the other time zones. Plus minus.
It's going to be 7 p.m. Mountain West.
Yeah.
For all you Coloradians.
Yeah, for the like sliver of America that's on that time zone. But no, we're going to be building that tonight, giving it away. So if you want to be entered into that, stop by, say hi, hang out for a little bit, watch the build, talk to us. I'll be on there a little bit as well. And we can have a good time and give away a keyboard.
Yeah, I just finished lubing up the switches yesterday, so it's gonna be fun. New red inks. Took a vote in our Discord, and we are spring swapping them to the black ink springs. So they're basically going to be Gatoron inks that look red. But finished up lubing them with some 205. Going to be extra smooth. So it'll be cool. I mean, hey, if you're looking for a new board and you don't want to buy it,
Yeah. It's
there
a
you go.
good board. It's like, I think total it's probably what, like $250, $300 in value.
Yeah,
We'll be
in that
giving away.
range for sure.
So,
So, but moving on, we have got our topic today. So this is a topic that whenever we first started, it was something that we definitely wanted to go into because we've seen some very interesting changes with a few of these mounting types. So, the community is growing and it's changing, it's evolving. And what we like to see is innovation. And in doing so, we've been able to see in the last 6 months to a year a lot of different types of mounting styles. And when I say mounting styles, I mean how you have to be able to type on it, or else we just have switches laying around with cables everywhere. Um, and so you have to be able to type on something, but a big part of this community and a big part of what people like is how that sounds and how that feels. And so we're just going to go through the kind of the standard mounts that are typically what you're going to find in group buys. There are also, exceptions and different interesting ways, but these are the most popular that you see. So yeah, and we're not saying any of these are strictly better or worse. We are just kind of giving you the information, giving you some opinions that we have on the matter as well. So
yeah, I mean, it's just like anything with keyboards. It's all personal preference, and that may change over time. I know Chewy's a big fan of something like Sandwich. Um, I like a lot of different things. I have Sandwich, top mount. There's no right or wrong, just like most things. So it's all about what you like, how you like the way it feels, and even down to like the different switches you have. You may like a different mounting type. So,
Mhm.
but yeah.
So before we get into the mounting types, excuse me, I shouldn't be drinking a soda. It's
I've
probably
done
just
that
a
before, and
terrible.
I'm like, oh wait, no.
Like, what am I doing? um, so sorry for any audio listeners or just anyone listening. So we're going to talk real quick about how vibration works. So for those who don't know, or for those who've just never cared to think about it, which honestly was me until I started thinking about this, is so what vibration is just a sound wave, and it is a sound wave that is traveling through a medium. In this case, most of the time it's going to be aluminum or other metals, or plastics. So when you hit the switch, especially if you're bottoming out, because while you are not technically supposed to bottom out in the correct way of typing, um, I'd venture to say 95% of us do. Um, and even if you don't, you're going to bottom out. Um, so that hit, when you hit the switch down, you're transferring energy from your hands into the keyboard, and then those vibrations are going to travel through the keyboard into the desk, into the ground, and basically fade out. And so how you mount it depends on how it's going to sound, because it's going to vibrate through these items very differently, based on a lot of different options. So
Yeah, and the vibration is not only on the down, it can also, depending on things like spring weight and stuff like that, it can affect the way it vibrates on the return as well, which is a lot of times what people. Um, it really changes the way it feels. Like I've said this before a couple times to Chewy, like the way that a switch returns. Obviously, he likes really heavy switches, so the return is a lot faster, and there's a lot more of a punch to that. Um, and you feel that a little bit more when you have something like a stiffer feel, and then as opposed to something like a plateless build or something with a lot of flex to it. So there's a lot that can happen with vibration. Um, Denser materials obviously make it easier for the vibrations to travel. Um, Whereas if it's got a lot of flex to it, it's not gonna it's gonna be taking some of that force away from it. So you're not gonna have um, as much of a vibration because there's more flux. It's not
Mhm.
like pounding against a wall. You know, you're it's punching a pillow versus punching a wall. So um, yeah.
Yeah. Um, so we'll kind of go in. I'll quickly list the six types that we're going to talk, or I guess seven, although two of them are very similar. But tray mount, top mount, bottom mount. Those are going to be probably the three most popular. Um, Bottom mount and top mount are relatively similar. You see way more top mount. I would say top mount and tray mount are the two most popular that you typically see. Sandwich mount, integrated plate, plateless, and gasket mount. Um, so we'll start out with tray mount. Tray mount is going to be stuff like the tofu and the 5 degree and the fiel and the clippa. So things to identify a tray mount, if you see it without the plate and PCB, there's going to be standoffs throughout the keyboard, throughout the bottom of the keyboard that you actually screw the PCB into. Um, so there are a lot of pluses to this. I would say that you know standardized PCBs help, especially on like a 60% board. You don't have to worry about custom plates because you can just get a standard plate. So that's why there's some people that go, I want to buy a FIEL, but I already have a plate or I don't want a brass plate and I already have a PCB. So you just go get your own stuff. And that's great. That promotes being able to buy a lot of, not having to buy what they are providing and buy something else. Or if you want to get something custom done, that too can help justify your decision of not getting other options, so you can have multiple boards and multiple plates, and you're able to switch things out a lot.
Yeah, and with this, because of the way that it's done, you have a lot of flexibility with it, and it also makes it to where it's a little bit cheaper. There's not as much machining that's happening. Like you're not having to worry about, um, for something like a gasket mount board where you're having to actually like go in and design the divots in the case in order to mount the gaskets, and having those extra screw holes go all the way through the aluminum or whatever material your case is made out of. It's a very standard style. I would say tray mount is probably like the standard of what you would kind of assume. Tray mount and top mount are kind of the two, like, okay, it's a keyboard.
Yep.
Um, it makes it really really standard feel, really simple. You're not having a lot of um, plate is not necessarily affecting the actual keyboard as much as it would as if it was a top or bottom mount or like a sandwich mount, just because the plate is not really touching the actual case. Like it's not vibrating as one in a sense. It's going through those screw posts. It's mounted to the PCB rather than um, the case is mounted to the PCB rather than to the plate. Um, so it's definitely a little bit different, a little bit feel, and it can be a little bit uneven depending on like the machining of the actual screw posts. Sometimes you'll see if like on like super low end stuff, it'll be where the posts are like a little bit different heights that can kind of mess with you, and then your looks a little bit wonky, but typically it's pretty good. But it
Mhm.
can be a little bit uneven.
Yeah, and also like screw hole placement. A lot or a standoff placement. So there's typically there's one kind of to the right of the space bar, um, and that can create a weird sense of unevenness. Of it's going to be significantly more a firmer typing experience around those standoffs because there's not as much give, where somewhere that doesn't have a standoff is not going to have is going to have way more give. So typing on one side versus another might give you a different feel, and that's a very common I would say that's a very common complaint about tray mount. We are seeing kind of a revolution with tray mounts. People are starting to take out the middle and bottom right to create basically there's two kind of off to the side in the middle and then two more on the very far sides. So it creates, I mean, that you're still having your stiffer areas, but overall it's very even and it's symmetrical. We've seen that the new Fiel has those two spots removable. We're seeing things from a lot from Mechanisk where you can, he's got one coming out where you can remove all six of them, or you can just have one. So it's cool that we're seeing these different designs because people, we've heard people just getting a router or getting something to just grind out one of the standoffs because they don't like it. And so it's a real, it's cool seeing, it's cool and fresh and nice to see these things starting to change and offer, maximum customizability. So
Yeah. And then my biggest thing with tray mount that I hate is having to deal with those tiny little screws, because it never fails when one of them, you've got it on a screwdriver and then it just, you're trying to either put it in or take it out, and it just falls in between the plate and the PCB, and then it's kind of lost until you actually get the whole plate and PCB out of the case.
Yep.
So that's kind of a frustrating time. You want to make sure you have a nice little magnetic screwdriver to try to help. A lot of times what I do is I end up using a pair of like needle nose pliers to set the screw in a little bit and then screw it in. But that can be pretty frustrating.
yeah. So, but I personally don't mind this layout. I think it's fine. It's not my very first option, but I have a Fiel coming. It's not my favorite, but I don't think it's my least favorite. I do have a least favorite that I've typed on, but people are right. There's uneven spots, and if you're a heavy typer like I am, you can definitely feel those heavy spots. It just has to be done right, I think.
Yeah, I think I would agree with you. It's not my least favorite, not my favorite. I would say if you're looking to get into something like a polycarbonate plate or something that has a lot of flex, this is a little bit weird because that's when you really start noticing those uneven spots with the standoffs being where they are. Unless you're getting something like a Fiel or a round 3 Clippa and you want to have that flex and you can remove those posts, then that could be cool. But when you have just like a PC plate on just a standard tray mount, it can be a little bit funky feeling sometimes.
I would suggest a stainless steel plate. I think that will help prevent if you're trying to avoid uneven feeling. Stainless steel is very rigid, not a lot of flex. So get yourself a stainless steel plate. Our mod Willio uses a tofu with a stainless steel plate, and it feels great. You can't really notice because that stainless steel locks everything in place. So,
yeah. And then next we have top mount, which is actually what my Orange 75 is top mount. It's a very consistent feel of across the board just because of the way that the mount is. It's basically a lot of times, depending on the size, it's either 4, maybe 5, I guess even 6 if you're looking at like a TKL or something that was top mount. On the top and bottom, 6 screws across the top and the bottom, and they just mount right up into the top. And it's really simple, really easy to access the PCB. This is, in my opinion, this is one of the better options if you are looking to get into something like a hot swap board, just because it's really simple to basically put it all together. And if you have to mess with one of those hot swap sockets, you can get to it real easy. You don't have to unscrew a whole lot. You just basically take the case in half, turn it around, and it's there. You don't have to actually take the whole plate PCB combo out of the board in order to get it taken care of. So
Yeah.
it's pretty nice.
Yeah, and it is a very consistent option. It's usually on the cheaper side to design and manufacture because um, I think this is one of the few boards that I don't mind, but if you think about it from like a vibration standpoint, there's a lot of movement. There's a lot of travel for it to get to the desk, which is, the sound is trying to find something to spread. So it's having to kind of go from the plate through the screws into the top piece, into the other screws, into the bottom piece, into the ground. And obviously, that's all happening instantaneously, but that can create. You can run into some sound issues. I know you've had issues with your space bar, and I know that that you've had you have to kind of finagle it and work a little bit harder to get it to sound exactly how you want it. But I mean, at the end of the day, the Orange 75 sounds amazing, but you worked on it. But for someone who maybe doesn't, who's a little more new to it, and trying to figure out why certain things are sounding the way they are, it could be because there's a lot of, the screw. You really have to make sure all your screws are tight and even. So a lot of moving pieces, but once again, it's so great. And we didn't talk about it in tray mount, but being able to work on something like that, where you just unscrew one side and then you're able to work on it, is very overlooked because a big thing that I've talked about before is if you're trying to flash your PCB, try to have it 100% done. But I know you might be excited to put it in the case and start typing away, but get everything done and flashed and ready to go before you screw in the last part of your PCB or last part of your case, because having to do that can be frustrating.
Yeah, a lot of times those screws are pretty small too. It's easy to lose one. That's not what you want to have happen, especially if it's something like super, or relatively hard to find. Some screws can be harder to find than others. But yeah, my big thing with top mount, the way it sounds, it typically sounds a little bit funky. If that, like, it's hard to describe the way it sounds, but because it vibrates through the top then into the bottom, it's a very different sound than a lot of these other ones in terms of like bottom and sandwich mount have a relatively similar sound. They are still a little bit different, but top mount, because of the way it vibrates, especially if you're using something that has a relatively thin bezels on the sides, it really changes the way that it sounds, and does sound funky. Like my space bar sounded
Funky monkey.
weird.
So, only other thing is, and that's good. This is going to be the case with most of these outside of tray mount, is custom plate. So you can't you do, if you want an extra plate, typically you're going to have to buy an extra plate with the group buy, or if it's something like the KBD 67, if you want an extra plate, you have to go buy an extra plate because and it has to be for the KBD 67. There's not really a standard top mount plate because every case is going to be different. Even, all it takes is, even if they look like they might be able to work, it's probably not going to, or at least it's not going to function exactly how it should. But that kind of, that goes with most other mounts. Tray mount is that's their big, a big draw, is that it uses everything that it wants. But I like top mount. I think it's fine. I wouldn't pick it. It's probably on the second half of my list of mounting options, but
I like it for just ease of use. I think it's just super simple. Um, it allows you to make a case that's just overall thinner profile, like the Orange 75. If you ever watched me stream the building of it, or if you've ever seen one in person, if you were to open it up, there's like a millimeter of space between the PCB and the bottom of the case. Having that be top mount means that they're able to almost kind of recess that whole PCB plate into the top of the board, and have minimal amount of space, make the board as thin as possible. So it's pretty cool.
Yeah. So moving on, bottom mount. So as top mount, as we said, there's the top part of the case, and you screw the plate into the top part of the case, and then with separate screws, you screw it to the bottom. Bottom mount, you screw the plate into the bottom part, and then with separate screws, you take the top and you screw that into the bottom of the case. So in reality, you can have a fully functioning keyboard without the top part of your case. Um, I don't know why you would ever do that, but you can.
Truly
So,
bezel-less.
so the vibration does simply go straight into the bottom. So not a lot of movement when it comes to moving parts. Very similar, evenly distributed feeling. It's probably going to have a little less flex, depending on how big the internals are, but than top mount. But I think my biggest problem with bottom mount, this is my least favorite, is you have to take the whole thing apart. It's
Yeah.
a lot. That's, you're thinking minimum 12 to 14 screws just to get to the bottom of your PCB.
Yeah, I definitely agree. Really on all fronts. Super even feeling, just the way that it is. It sounds good. Well, depending on what you're looking for, I guess that's kind of a subjective term of good. But it's kind of a pain to work with. It sounds like a very first world problem to have to undo all these extra screws. But my thing is, if you're spending as much money as you do on these keyboards, you want to get something that's easy for you to work with and to take care of. And having something that's bottom mount is just a lot harder um, to work with. And my biggest thing is I don't like that it doesn't really integrate the top. Want the keyboard, I like it to be able to utilize all of the different pieces and all of them have a true purpose in the design and the way the keyboard feels and sounds. And like you said, the top really is just there at that point as aesthetics.
Yep.
It's not there for a function of, I mean, it'll still change the way it sounds and it does reduce vibrations if you've got like something like a huge bezels on it. Obviously, it'll vibrate less if you have the top on there than if you just have only the bottom. But it doesn't serve as much of a purpose as it does in almost all of these other mounts.
Yeah, the vibrations just kind of go up and then they go right back into where they've started. So there's not really a travel reason, I guess, to even go up there. But that's why we said it's fully functioning keyboard without the top piece. Not for me though. Typed on a few, just doesn't do it for me. Probably my least favorite. Well, second least favorite.
It's fairly rigid too. Like it's I would say, even though the way it is, I guess it has to do with the way that that force versus the screw works. It's very rigid, even more so than a top mount would be. Yeah. Because you're basically, yeah. I don't want to get into like the way I don't want to get into the way like force works on a screw head, but it is stiffer.
It's a push versus a pull.
Yeah, it is stiffer on a bottom mount than it is on a top mount.
So moving on, my personal favorite, sandwich mount. So sandwich mount it's unique because what we've seen so far is that you're having to screw something specifically into it, whether it's the PCBs specifically into the tray or the plate, you have to specifically screw that separately into part of the case, where this is like a sandwich. You take the bottom piece, you lay your plate in between. There's usually some cutouts. Sometimes the plate will stick out on the side, not stick out, but will go all the way to the sides. And then you take the top piece, and basically all you're doing is you're screwing the bottom piece to the top piece while just wedging the plate in between. So what this does is create a very nice even feel. It can be a little stiffer because you're using the plate against the case as opposed to against the screws. So there's not these points. Instead of it being the pressure point against the screw, it's a lot flatter, so there's more surface area that you're actually pressing on. Um, so I this like I said, this is my favorite. I think it sounds great. It has because it's kind of a lot of the sound comes from the plate, and then it just kind of slowly vibrates into. I say slowly, but it's happening at the speed of sound. But it's just kind of resonating more. I personally feel through the rest of the case as opposed to going through specific points. It's just kind of the whole thing is resonating. So
Yeah, I think, you know, if you were to watch like our layout debates and the way we talk about specifically like the 75% uh, layout of how we both really enjoy that layout because of how much innovation there is there and how much opportunity there is for change. I feel like sandwich mount is the 75% of mounting styles because there's so much you can do. If you do a sandwich mount with a polycarbonate, it's going to feel way different than if you did aluminum or like an all brass. It really has a lot of opportunity to change the way it feels, even down to the thickness of um, the area around where the actual mounting is. Can change the way the board feels and give it a little bit more flex or take flex away. Sandwich mount really can change based on which board, and it gives the designer a lot of opportunity to adjust the way it feels and how the board comes together. And it kind of bred what sandwich mount bred what the probably the most popular hip mounting style is right now with gasket mounts. That's kind of the idea behind that, which we'll get into those a little bit later. But sandwich mount, pretty cool, super easy to take care of too. Like our TX60s that we have, she's got two, I've got one. Sandwich mount, it's like what, 8 screws? Yeah, 8 screws.
8 screws.
And you're done.
The whole thing comes apart.
So.
It can be, I will say, it can be a little annoying aligning it all. You kind of you can't, it's harder to like hold it up on top. It just depends per case. Like the TX60, you kind of have to like hold the bottom end up so you can screw it in, but it can get a little tricky. But if you're used to it, I mean, that's if I did have to complain, is that putting it together can be a little tricky. But once again, that's just on the TX60. That doesn't mean that every single sandwich mount board is going to be that difficult to put together. But yeah, it's just less moving parts. A+ for me.
It all resonates together too, which is really nice. It's like when you're looking at like a musical instrument, like a guitar or something. Both Chewy and I worked in musical instrument sales for a while. The difference between like a low end guitar and a high end guitar is how many pieces of wood are make up that guitar, right? So something like a Squire, that's $100. This is gonna have like 8 or 9 different pieces of wood glued together to make that one instrument. Whereas like an American made, $1,000 Fender is gonna have 2 or 3 pieces of wood glued together to make that instrument. So it just overall resonates better. It sounds better. It feels better. It's more even.
So you hear it. The sandwich mount is the American Fender of the keyboard community.
Well, yeah, maybe. I think integrated plate's got something to fight for there.
Yeah, exactly. So integrated plate. This is probably my second favorite. For those who don't know, I like a much more stiff typing feel. I do like brass. I would go stainless steel for a lot of things just because I feel like I would really like it, but a lot of options nowadays are brass. But integrated plate is going to be the stiffest, hands down. Most of the time, it's going to be integrated plates. A lot of the times, to make sure that they're structurally sound, have a thicker plate in general. So when you're hitting, if we're talking about travel of vibration, you hit the switch goes directly into the plate, which is all just one top piece of this keyboard, straight into the bottom and straight down. It's going to be loud. It's going to be There's not a lot of moving parts, so any vibration that you hear is just coming directly from what you're hitting. So this does have the fewest moving parts of any keyboard at the moment. But there are some downsides. So
Yeah, this is like, I like to think of this as like the Apple approach to custom keyboards of like the unified design. Some really popular boards that have an integrated plate, when keyless tofu, even the HHKB one does as well.
Yeah.
And then a lot of the Rama boards are integrated plates, except for I think the U80 is the first one
yeah,
recently.
U80 is not. Yeah.
Both KOU and M60 are integrated plates. It's nice because there's not a whole lot going on, but it's very, very, very stiff, and the plates being thick can be hard to work with sometimes. I know this is not an integrated plate, but for thickness, I know Chewy had a oh my gosh, the name is Zephyr, right? I almost said Xeno, but I was like, Xeno's not thicker, but
not thicker, nor do I own one.
Yeah. The Zephyr had the very, very thick 4.5 millimeter plate.
Yep, 4.5 millimeter.
And that made it hard. Whereas a lot of these, some of them have 4 millimeters, some of them have even thicker than that. Integrated plates that can be kind of hard to work with. Switches can be difficult to get in and out. And it's a very fixed layout. That's the other thing, is you can't I can't go to someone like a specialty vendor and get a plate cut for a Win keyless tofu and make it, a full 60. It's just, it is what it is. The M60As were all split backspace, and same thing with the KOU. You couldn't have standard backspace. You have to have split backspace.
Which I don't see as a problem.
Yeah, but I mean, both of us love it, but a lot of people might not. I don't use 7U bottom row very often. And a lot of the boards that are integrated plate are locked on 7U spacebar. So it's...
sorry, you can continue.
No. I was going to say, so it makes it difficult.
Yeah, and for someone who knows what they want, if they see something that's like, oh, I like a fixed layout. I like fixed layout boards. The Win keyless tofu is one of the best mounting systems to me for what I own, because it's a fixed layout. The only thing I don't like about it is that I like stepped caps lock, and it doesn't offer stepped caps lock. But because it's fixed layout, you don't have to worry about switch alignment. You don't have to worry about wobble or side wiggle room with the switches, or you do if the plate's not cut correctly. But in theory, you wouldn't have to worry about that. So if you see something like, I before I got the Zephyr and realized I just didn't like 65%, I thought about getting a KOU, and I was like, I really like this layout. Other than the non-step caps lock, split backspace and nice, cool bottom row. Like, I really liked it. And I was like, that's great, because now that I like that, I know that I'm not going to have to worry about a lot of things with a standard plate. But that can be a bad thing, because people can look at the Rama M60 and go, I don't like split backspace. So,
yeah. Plus,
it is, or sorry, you go.
I was gonna say, another really cool thing is, like, with the Rama boards, or even the KBD fans, the Tofus, you have the ability to have your plate be the exact same color as the rest of your case. So, and that looks really cool. I know that's something super small, but from an aesthetic point of view, when you peek through and you see it, it's all unified. And the fact that you don't have to worry about fitting anything together, really. It's just like,
it's
done.
Just there. Also, you don't see through it.
Mm-hmm.
You don't see the PCB at all. You only see the switch. So, the only other thing that I will mention about this, it can take away some tactility. So tactility, you're feeling a bump, and you're feeling how much, if you pull out a switch like this is a linear, so this doesn't even matter, but you'll feel a pretty heavy bump, because any movement that you're getting from that bump, that vibration is going straight into your hand. Whereas you put it on a plate, it's going to not feel 100% as tactile because of those vibrations moving it back into your hands. Whereas an integrated plate, since it's so stiff, it's going to be absorbing a lot of that. So something that I didn't like about the Zephyr, I wanted to use tactile switches on it, where but those bumps are reduced some. I remember when I first got my Holy Jesus switches, I was like, "Oh, this is great," and then I put it in a TX16. I was like, "Oh, this is even better than that!" Like it just got better and better because there's less constricting of that. But with linears, I will say, like I put creams in my tofu, and it feels so good, and it sounds great too. And that's I love that board because of that. So
Yep.
like it's stiff.
Like
This
it's
is probably
stiff.
my second. This is probably my second favorite.
Yeah.
It's just hard to come by a good one because layouts, if it's not the exact layout that I want, then it's gonna not. I'm not gonna like it as much.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't necessarily. I don't think it's quite my second. I don't know. It's hard for me because I'm not a big linear guy. I like
Mm.
tactile switches, so it's harder. But I don't know. We'll see. I've got creams coming. I've got some Nolives.
I'm gonna try out my inks this upcoming weekend.
I am. I am. We'll see. I might be back on the linear grind like when I first got into mechanical keyboards and I only used cherry reds.
There you go.
But yeah. And then next we have plateless. This, in terms of actually putting it together, this is probably the most difficult, especially if you're not using PCB mount switches, which you
God.
shouldn't. Just gonna say right now, if you're not using PCB mount switches and you want to do a plateless build, just rethink it. Maybe get something like a polycarbonate plate or something that has a lot of flex to it if you want that. But plateless can be a pain in the butt, even with PCB mount switches. Sometimes it'll still be a little bit off center. Different PCB manufacturers have different variances in the size of the holes for the PCB mount switches, so it can still kind of be a little cockeyed. You put your switches on and they don't really fit quite together. Yeah,
Especially on like PCBs where the bottom row, if it's way more open, like the DZ60, like that Swiss cheese, you're losing the reason you have plate mounted switches or PCB mounted switches because those holes, because they're trying to accommodate for multiple layouts that there's nothing to go there. So sometimes you just have only one side and then that can wiggle. So unless that's something you don't care about, typically you want to be able to have a nice, neat, clean looking board with the caps on. Lots of flex. Literally the exact opposite of integrated plate. So because there's no plate, the only thing that you're touching is the PCB. And not particle board, but printed circuit board is made out of FR4. I think. I think
I think
that sounds similar. I don't know. I think that's why they started making FR4 plates. But it's bendy. I mean, you can grab a PCB and bend it some. And
it is
so
FR4.
for people who want that flex, by all means, this is great. This is a great option. That's why we're starting to see, we'll kind of include this in there, but the half plates where the outer rim has a plate for support for your mods, and just to add a little bit more support on the keyboard. And then the inside, the alphas are going to be plateless so that you can have a much softer typing experience where you're typing the most, but you still have some support there. So you're not, because you can damage the PCB this way.
Yeah. You can definitely damage the PCB, and we've seen a lot of, like you said, a lot of the half plates, a lot of the polycarbonate plates that'll be options with PCBs that have flex cuts in them.
Mm-hmm.
All about getting that flex there. Really, plateless, it's not, it's super affordable, but it's not very popular. I don't know a ton of people who are like, man, plateless is the way to go. Most of the time, everyone's like, just get something to put there, so in that way it's just
a smidge more secure.
Yeah, more secure. It's easier to clean. Like when you have a plate, you're not having anything touching directly to the PCB. If you do like get random hairs or you're eating at your desk, you get crumbs on there. So it's just
Beard,
yeah.
the beard hair is real inside keyboards.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean that's, and we've started to see, like I said, we've started to see more half plate builds, and I think if you want to try something like that, that's the way to go. Because you are, and we're even starting to see PCBs with relief cuts in them, so they can bend even more. The one that Mechanisk just had Wilba design for them. I don't know the name of it. I think it's like the WB60,
WT60, I think.
WT60. Those have relief cuts in them, and so that in between the rows there are just empty spaces where you can bend more. And if you want a more flexible experience, go for it. But and I'm glad that there's things there for those people.
Don't
So
flex too hard because then you'll break your PCB.
flex, just punch right through the PCB.
Yeah. I want to see that. I
So
want to see someone on Reddit with one of those like the flex cut PCBs and they just like go way too hard and just punch it in half.
just crack the PCB. So this is going to be my least favorite.
Yeah, me too. I mean, this is like plateless is like what the it's funny that it's almost coming back around, but like there was a while where even in like standard boards like Corsairs and Duckies and stuff where they were getting crap for not for having plateless boards. Like it became a big thing when they started having the stainless steel plates and stuff. Because a while ago they didn't really have plates. They just kind of were like, "Hey, yeah, here's your switches and your PCB." So I don't know. I don't really like plateless. I don't really see. I think, like Chewy said, get a half plate, get some extra support in there, or get like a polycarbonate plate or something like that that's still relatively flexible if you're looking for the flex.
The build tomorrow has got a polycarbonate plate, or tonight, sorry. The build tonight has got a polycarbonate plate. Never built on one. It'll be interesting to see. But just holding it, you can sit there and wobble. Like it's not going to be adding a whole lot more. I can't imagine the amount of stiffness that's going to add to a build. So, and then on top of that, you now can use like Holy Pandas or box switches or a lot, any switch that's not PCB mount, and then be able to line stuff.
Yep, absolutely.
But
Last but not least, the new kid on the block, the hyped up, maybe rightfully so, maybe not, but gasket mount boards. What's your thought?
so I've typed on a few. I don't personally. I mean, it's cool. It's neat. It's quieter. It's very evenly distributed. If you've done the gaskets correctly, I don't think we're starting to see lower prices, which I'm liking. I mean, lower prices in general are great, but I mean, look at the Polaris. Polaris as a inexpensive keyboard that incorporates gasket mount, which is pretty unheard of. So I think that I don't know if it's going to be for me or not. I need to like try it again, mess with it for a little bit. But basically what a gasket is it's like a sandwich mount. So you have your top piece and your bottom piece, and then it's kind of rested. But instead of being metal on both sides, that plate is actually sitting on a piece of rubber or a gasket, if you will. Just a small piece. Sometimes it's not always rubber, but basically something to absorb vibration. So what that's doing is when that vibration hits that, it's not leaving those points anymore. So it's going to be quieter. It's going to feel a little softer because there's just you're pressing a little bit more on something you're not just pressing on metal anymore. And with a lot of you're going to have more even sound.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think this is kind of the one where we're still discovering more or less, and I don't think it's not like something like what we talked about with tray mount where people are removing posts and stuff and experimenting in that way. This is like we're still trying to find the best way to implement a gasket mount.
Mhm.
There's been tons of different styles, tons of different ways to do it. There's, you know, true 100% isolation where no metal ever touches metal in terms of plate. And then there's other versions where it's like only on one side. Um, there's people who just put like literal O rings just in there. Um, so it's just there's still a lot. I think this is kind of like a almost a we'll see kind of thing
Yeah.
because it's only been about 2 years. We just talked with Krellbit um, this past Wednesday on our stream, who he had a board called the Meme, which was one of the first boards that I saw. I know it wasn't necessarily the first board; it was one of the first boards I saw that really talked about doing gasket mounts, um, and trying to implement them in more boards. Because I think at that time it was really only I think Key Colt was doing them, but those boards were still relatively super small runs and not really open as they are now. Um, it like Chewy said, it behaves a lot like a sandwich mount, but just a little bit of flex. We'll see. I think it could be cool. I think once we get a standardized implementation of it, that makes it a little bit easier and something that will also help bring costs down.
Mhm.
You know, although our community's small, I'm sure if there's 30 boards a year using the same style of gaskets, it'll be a lot easier, it'll be a lot cheaper to get those gaskets produced and um, implemented into these boards. But I think it's a really cool new thing that the community's doing, and is really cool to see something like the Polaris come out at a sub $300 implementing a full gasket mount.
Mhm.
I haven't used it a ton. I've used Type on a couple at meetups and whatnot. Um, I didn't hate it, but I didn't get a chance to try it enough to really develop a full 100% definitive placement on the
Yeah.
mounting style list.
It's certainly interesting. I'm someone that I've been typing on a Gatoron Ink, a lubed with 205. If someone came up to me and said that board is too loud, I would laugh at them. It's quiet and it's sandwich. So a lot of this is going to have to do with sound. There are people that like a big thocky sound. I'll use the Fiel from Nathan Kim that he did. If you want to look at that video, like loud, that is like aggressive in your face, box navies. If you want to piss everybody off in a 5 mile radius, you can use something like that. But there's also the people that want to eliminate as much sound as possible. And I'm not saying that, you don't have to get a gasket to make it quiet. You can make a quiet board. For instance, the Orange 75, incredibly quiet board. No one's going up to him saying, "Hey, stop typing." It's very quiet, but it does help. It does help absorb and absorbs some of that sound up and makes it quieter. If that's what you're into, that's totally fine. Um, so like you said, there's not a standard version. Every gasket mount board is going to be slightly different. So where sandwich mount, I mean, yes, all these boards based on where the screws are, other than tray mount, based on where the screws are, it's going to change every single board, from spot to spot. But with gaskets, if are you doing the, like Eric said, either an O-ring or a strip, that's going to change it because that's more material. So, and the last thing I will say about gasket is more room for user. So if you have to install these strips, you know, it can be challenging to get them in the exact place that intended.
Yeah. And I think we've seen that with a couple boards. I know like the Leaf 60 had issues with its gaskets um, back a couple months ago. You know, the gaskets that they used didn't quite come out the way that a lot of people had thought they would, didn't quite perform the way that they did. Now on their next board, they're changing it up. Instead of doing long strips, they're doing like smaller, tiny strips. So that's when we say there's no like real standardized way. That's what we mean. There's no, you look at every 60% PCB, it's got the same tray mount screw locations. There's nothing like that for gasket mounts right now. That might come. It may never happen. I think that it probably would, eventually, just for ease of use. Another thing is with a gasket mount, because it is rubber, if somehow you damage it when you're taking the board apart or working on it, you can damage those gaskets. You can, if one of them starts coming out of unseated from where they're supposed to be inlaid into the top or bottom, you could actually like cut them because it's rubber. It's fairly easy to cut when you're talking about pushing against metal like aluminum and brass or stainless steel. And it's hard to replace. It's not something you can just like, it's not like a screw where you can go to a hardware store and be like, hey, I have this screw, find me another one. You're kind of SOL at that point.
So, well, I don't know where to put gasket just because there's too many variations, but after integrated and sandwich.
Yeah. I think it's one of those, like, it could be really cool. We'll see.
Yeah.
Like, I think it's one of those ones, like you said, it's the most variation. You could have a gasket board that might be your favorite board ever, and then another gasket board that you're just like, what were they thinking? There's a lot of variation there with the way that they put it together.
So, but yeah, I guess final thoughts. Osiris said this earlier. Go try them out. Don't listen to anybody saying, just because I said sandwich mount is my favorite does not mean that is the best one. For you, that doesn't mean it's the best one for anyone. It just means that's the one that I prefer the most. People are going to say tray mount. People often say tray mount's the worst. Don't believe them. Don't believe them until you try it. Go to a meetup, ask a buddy, do what you can to find someone that has something like this and just try it. Just type on as many boards, really feel, press down a little hard. Maybe on the plateless builds, don't press down too hard. But try them out because they're all slightly different, and it can be a huge determining factor of whether or not you like a board. So yeah, that's all I can say.
Yeah, absolutely. I couldn't agree more. Get out there, feel them, see what you like. The other thing that we didn't really talk about is that a lot of these mounting styles change the actual aesthetic of the way the board looks, the way it comes together. So that might be another factor if you don't really necessarily care, which I want you to care, but if you don't and you care more about the aesthetics, there may be a reason to go for something like a tray mount versus like a sandwich mount or an integrated plate. So try them out, see what you like, weigh your options.
Mm-hmm. If you can buy every board you can, go for it. But if you're someone who's like, I can afford a board every 6 months, well, we want you to just think about how you're going to be spending your hard-earned money. And just because someone says gasket mount's the best thing in the world does not mean you have to get a Polaris. I think the Polaris is a great board. I think if you get it, you probably will like it, but that's not going to mean that your tofu sitting at home is going to feel worse or better. So, but yeah. So thank you. That will wrap up. I guess I don't know if you have any.
No, I'm done. I think that does wrap it up.
We left all those good vibrations right on the table. Sorry. So shout out to our sponsors real quick. One more time, SwitchMod, switchmod.net/Mechs on Deck, 4% off. All these links are going to be below. Dixie Mech, go to mechsondeck.dixiemech. Grab some 8008. Get you some 8008 in your life. Some hot pink action.
Everyone needs those nipple homing keys.
You know it.
Last but not least, Zap cables. We are running the giveaway until tomorrow. That is for 2 custom cables from Zap Cables. You just got to submit a Twitch appropriate emote to our Discord channel. That is really the only rule. It just has to be appropriate for the Twitch terms of service. And yeah, have fun with it. Submit something. We want to see your art. We want to see what you can do with cartoonizing us or making a Switch tester. Who knows? Do what you can. We'd love to see it. And you can get a free cable. And then just another reminder, Chewy is going to be streaming later tonight a build of a tray mount tofu, this regular standard 60% burgundy tofu with some red inks that have been basically converted into standard black inks, but they're still red.
There's a bag right there, that bag right on the shelf. Those are those lubed up inks.
I'm excited. It's gonna be a good time. We're gonna build it. We're gonna give it away. So stop by.
Thank you. Didn't shout out on the first time we said this, but thank you to Alhex
Absolutely
for providing us with giveaway.
We really appreciate it. And then, yeah, I think if you just join us Wednesday, tomorrow night, 8 p.m. Central, for our standard stream. Who are we interviewing on Wednesday?
Summit Cables.
Ooh.
So Summit Cables, he's a cool guy. There's two of them, I think, Chris and Rora. But I think we're having, I believe, Rora. I'll be 100% honest. I get confused on which one's which. Could be the same person. But he's a cool guy. He's been on our Discord for a while. Summit Cables is kind of coming up in the cable world. So I'll be happy to get him on. And last but not least, if you're going to be in the Houston area this upcoming Saturday, both Osiris and I will be at the Houston meetup the 17th. Come say hi. We want to talk to you. Show us your boards. We'll show you our boards. If you show us yours, I'll show you mine. You know. So,
no, we're really excited.
Thank you.
But we're really excited to get out to Houston and meet some people that we've been talking to for the past couple months. So yeah, if you're there, Chewy said, come say hi.
And I'll tell you one thing. Buy a Switch tester.
Well,
but y'all have a good day.
Bye now.